Hi, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Well, I was just looking through some of the comments, and I was very surprised to see one that attributed to me a quote that stated, "Bring a child up the same as a puppy." Now, the lady, I think it was the lady in question described a scene where they were in America and they were talking around the water fountain. So obviously they were discussing the different methods of, all ladies of course, and they were discussing the different methods of bringing up a child, training a child to become a responsible adult. And the writer expressed a surprise that I hadn't mentioned anything about the clicker method. And then, of course, she said something about that was based on an electric light. You know, one of those electric lights, a special one that if you go like this, it goes on, and then you do this again and it goes off. So apparently in this video that I did, I'd mentioned training a child like a puppy. Sorry, I don't think that this was me. For one thing, I'm not experienced in training dogs, and while I can see that sometimes the idea of a reward or an absence of a reward is a way to, say, treat a dog, I never actually could bring myself to think of my son as a dog or a puppy, and so I'm thinking that you must have me mixed up. So what is my philosophy? Clicker method I know nothing of, and the idea of turning my son on and off like a light bulb didn't appeal. I tried to bring up my son, and I was a single parent for many years. I came to America with a 6-year-old boy in 1992, and we were together as father and son until he left to take his first job. During that time, what was my method? My method was to treat him like a thinking, sentient, sensitive person. Now, did we have disagreements? Yes, we did. How did we overcome those? Well, I've given several stories in past videos where we did have words, where we did disagree in the way that things should be done, and where I gave him choices. Now, I personally think that you can tell a kid all day long to do or not do something, and it will not mean a damn thing. What you have to do, I think, is to realize the way in which they respond. Now, even as a very young boy, because we had come to California, to the States, with very little. I was a musician who had always wanted to come to America to play with great musicians, and I had to sell my trombone for the ticket. So life is full of ironies, isn't it? So anyway, we came here and we had many difficult choices to make, because lacking money is not a position to be in when you're in America. I had to take several jobs to make it through. But as I've said before, I made up my mind that I could not be a musician, because if I was a musician I'd be working mainly at night, say, and that would mean that I would have to delegate the putting to bed of my boy and the getting up, because he would be staying with someone else. Well, what kind of a life would that be? So I opted out of music, and I began to do other things that I had demonstrated a skill in. Now, how did we get over a particular crisis? If we're talking about bringing up a child, then the way that I think that you do it is you have to make them understand. If if they have transgressed, then you have to make them understand what it is about that that is not survival for you, in my case, as a single parent. So, did we have enough money to go around? No, actually we didn't. A lot of the time we didn't. We had to make do on not very much. So this would in itself present certain challenges to both me and my son, who, as I said, was 6 years old when we arrived in the States. And we had to approach those with what I think of as a sane adult-to-child fashion. Now, if my kid did something which was just against the survival of the two of us as a family, I would get the dictionary out. I'd hand him the dictionary and I'd give him a list of words which would cover the action, or what can I say, the misaction that he had been guilty of doing. I would also ask him, if you were the father, what would you do if you had a son who had done what you've just done? That was a very good thing, because it made him change his viewpoint from that of a victim, because that's how kids, I think, feel when they've been caught doing something and they go, oh no, Dad, and they don't agree with being punished. And if they don't agree with being punished, you have to get them to understand what the point is, that you as an adult have a job to do, and that job is to make them approach the world in a sane, responsible way. Now, if it went into a big disagreement and there were tears and it began to get heated and emotional, well, my method, I don't know whether this is the clicker method or whether it's the clap on, clap off, I would just grab the boy and I would hold him tight until he stopped crying. And when he stopped crying and the emotion died down, we would just walk away from that crisis. Later, when he had begun receiving incoming calls, as I always put it, I would say to him, "Can we talk now?" And we would talk over what had happened. But basically, prior to that, I would get him to look up the words that covered the situation that had happened. So, if he had been extremely selfish, I would get him to look up the word selfish, and any words that surrounded the idea of being selfish, lack of responsibility, lack of empathy, lack of unity within the family. So there he would be with the dictionary and with a list of words which I would hope would lead to a greater understanding. Now, I would ask him to define those words in his own way. So, selfish, what does selfish mean? What does it mean to you? What is it? Give me an example of a person who is being selfish. What does empathy mean to you? How will it apply to our lives, you and me, is how I would talk to him. Now, this had a twofold effect. It would certainly increase his vocabulary, because probably we would revisit those words again and again, and we would go over them. But perhaps you can see that what we were doing is that we were looking at what had happened in the light of new information which actually pertained to the incident. If he had done something that was deceitful, then he would be looking up honesty and deceit. He would be looking up any words which could be regarded as being to do with what had happened. Now, did he get punished? Yes, sometimes he did, but they were few and far between. And unlike a friend of ours who had a child around the same age as my son and had a refrigerator door that was covered in rules of the house. We never had any rules. What was one of the rules that we did have? We did have some rules, obviously. Well, once we got a television, which actually I never wanted, but when his mother came out to visit from the UK, she was horrified at the idea that our son was being so abused by not having a television. And she went out and she bought a television. So there we are. Now we've got the monster in the house with us. Well, what I said, because I'm just the same as anybody else, I'll get zoned if I find a program that I like. If I find a series that appeals to me, then I'll watch it. But in the cold light of day, when the television was not on, so we were not zoned, he and I agreed that we would not let television be senior to actually interacting father to son, son to father. So it didn't come senior to real life. So even if it was my favorite program or his favorite program, and he or I, as whatever the case may be, needed to talk, the TV went off. It was junior to our family and the survival in a sane, responsible way of our family. So the TV went off, and now, what is it you want to talk about? Whether it was him saying that or me. So that was the way that we did that. Now, the other way was in the case of once, and I have mentioned this before, but not everybody is an old-timer as far as looking at our videos, so you may have missed this. So certainly if you confuse me with a channel which advocates bringing up a child like a dog, then you've got it wrong, and you won't have heard what I consider is the right way to do this. On one particular occasion, he called me as a single parent. I felt that even when he was quite young, he needed to have a phone so that he could call me if he needed help, and I would be right there. It was just one of the things. He was very responsible, and so it never came to any misuse. So he called me and he said, I won't be home at the usual time tonight because I'm going home with a friend. And I asked him, who is a friend? He said, Dad, it's just a friend of mine. Where does he live? Well, Dad, I'm just going to his house. What's his phone number? I made all of the relevant inquiries as to what any responsible parent would do. I wanted to know where he was going, what time he would be home, what the names of the parents of that boy was, and that boy, and where he lived, and his phone number that I could contact. Now, all of those questions didn't sit well with my son, my normally sane son. And he said, oh, forget it, I'll come home. And he came home, and he was in a ratty mood. So I let him be in his ratty mood, and then I sat him down and said, can we talk now? And he said, yes. So I said, right, now, just imagine for a moment that you have gone to your friend and you haven't given me any of the information that I asked you for, and come 8 o'clock or 8:30, I'm getting pretty worried. I have no way of contacting you, so I call the police. And here we are in our living room, and you're sitting where the cop will be sitting when he takes down the details in his notebook of my missing son. I have a missing child. And he'll say to me, so, where did he go? Well, I don't know. Well, when was the last time you heard from him? well, about 5 o'clock, I think it was, about when he called me. And what was the call about? Well, he said he was going to see a friend. And who is the friend? I don't know. What's the contact number of the friend? I don't know. Where does the friend live? I don't know. And then I said to my son, how am I looking to that cop as a parent? And he admitted that I wouldn't be looking very good. So I said, now, do you understand why I asked the questions that I asked? But before I asked him that question, I said, now, why don't you go outside and sit outside the apartment for a little while and think about what we've just talked about, and then come in and talk to me. And he did that, and he came back in, and he was very sheepish, and he said, I understand what you mean. I'm sorry. So that was the kind of talk that we used to have. On the other spoiling decisions that have to be made by any parent who is a single parent and hard up for money, when their kid comes in and says, I would like that expensive pair of trainers, and why would you want the expensive ones? Well, all the kids have them. Okay, so I said, here's the deal. You know that we don't have very much money, so don't make me the bad guy by putting me on the spot to a point where I will have to say no. Now, do you know why I would not buy those Nike trainers for $200? And he said, yes, but I just wanted to ask. So I said, what does that do for me? And he said, well, yes, it puts you on the spot. So now you've asked for something that you start off knowing that we cannot afford, but it's me that has to say no to you, making you kind of like the victim. And he understood. And those were the kind of discussions that we had. Now, what was the other main influencing thing that I'd have to say about bringing up a child? I made sure that I was the last voice he heard when he went to sleep. And I would make sure also, of course, that he was the first voice that I heard. He was the first face, I was the first face that he saw when he woke in the morning. Now, I made sure of that, and every night I would read to him, and I would read good books. I would read things which were fun for him, and he would go to sleep with the sound of my voice in his ears. I think that that's important, and I think that that bonds you in a way that will never ever really be broken. Does that mean that he's always going to call on you? No, it didn't for me. My son has his own life now. He's in San Diego. He works for a radio and TV company, and he has a responsible job which he worked hard to get, to train for. He's not, like many people, he's not one for writing long letters, long emails. They're very short, painfully. Sometimes I describe him as a man of few words. Now, I don't deserve any better than that, because I wasn't a very good communicator to my parents when I was a kid. So, I guess what goes around comes around. Or is it I never know which way that is. Well, anyway, so to you ladies around the that water fountain talking about what I said about bringing up a kid like a dog, I'm not guilty unless you can show me a video where I can be seen or heard suggesting that that's how you bring up a child.